My name is Audrey Kim, and I'm 31 years old. 5 years ago, I left Seattle and never once looked back. I worked as a back-end developer for a cybersecurity firm that served major banks and government contracts. I wasn't just good at my job, I was absolutely essential. I solved problems other teams couldn't even explain. But outside of work, I barely existed, at least not to my family. We hadn't spoken since 2016, so when my phone buzzed on a quiet Wednesday night in October 2023, I was stunned to see my cousin Rachel's name. She was the only one who had my new number.
"Audrey," Rachel said softly, her voice hesitant. "Your parents are trying to reach you. They want you to come home for Christmas." I sank down slowly onto the edge of my tiny Brooklyn apartment bed, the worn quilt cool against my legs. "Now," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "After all these years?"
"They've been asking around," Rachel replied, her tone more certain now. "They seem serious." I hung up and just stared at the wall. I hadn't thought about my family in months, years really, but the memories flooded in fast, a relentless tide. I was always the odd one out, never the favorite. I remembered sitting in a cold office chair when I was 13, my knees pulled to my chest, while Dr. Patel, my childhood psychologist, plainly told my parents, "Audrey's struggles aren't from isolation, they're from being ignored." My mother scoffed. "We love both our kids equally." But even then, I knew she was lying. My older brother Dylan was the family charmer, a football star class president, and the undisputed golden boy. He got a brand new car on his 16th birthday, while I received a thrift store sweater that still faintly smelled of someone else, even after countless washes. Even at Christmas, Dylan's gifts sparkled under the tree. Mine felt like afterthoughts. Yet this year, they were finally calling me back, and they had absolutely no idea who I'd become.
Family gatherings were always a nightmare. Dylan would hold court loud, charming, and magnetic, while I melted into the background like forgotten furniture unnoticed by everyone. That's when I stumbled upon coding. It started with a dusty flyer taped to the high school bulletin board, "Intro to Computer Science Club, Room 27 Thursdays after school." I went once, and after that, I never missed a session. For the first time, I felt seen not by people, but by the irrefutable logic of code. The club became my sanctuary. We rebuilt old PCs from junkyard parts, traded programming books, passionately debated compilers, and stayed late debugging each other's projects. I even built my first game on a borrowed laptop.
"Mr. Alvarez." Our teacher pulled me aside one day. "You've got something special, Audrey," he said, his eyes kind. "Don't let anyone shrink you." By 17, I had a plan. I'd apply to college, leave Seattle, and build my future from scratch. Dylan, of course, was already enrolled at an elite university in California, riding on my parents' full financial support. Then came that Thanksgiving dinner. My dad raised his glass to Dylan, beaming, making us proud at Stanford. Cheers erupted, a cacophony of approval. Then Mom added almost as an aside, "As for Audrey, we're encouraging her to find steady work." My uncle Ever the Joker cracked, "We're hiring dishwashers at the diner." The whole table erupted in laughter, including my parents. I didn't laugh. What they didn't know was that I had already secured a full ride to a top-tier tech program in New York tuition housing, even a stipend all covered. I packed up quietly and moved into a dorm in Manhattan. I waited tables part-time, graduated at the top of my class, and landed a dream job at a cybersecurity firm before the ink was dry on my diploma. 4 years later, I had just led a multi-million-dollar integration for a global bank. The bonus was enough to buy a brownstone, so I called a realtor. Within a few days, my realtor found it the perfect brownstone condo in Fort Greene. 2 bedrooms, a sleek kitchen, exposed brick, and close to the park. At 31, I officially became a homeowner. 2 weeks before Christmas, I hosted a small housewarming. Just my real friends, the ones who had seen me pull all-nighters, cry over failed code, and still show up every single day. We sat on floor cushions with Thai takeout and cheap wine surrounded by unpacked boxes and the joyful sound of laughter. Lisa raised her glass. "To Audrey," she said, her voice warm, the quiet one who turned silence into power. We clinked glasses, and I smiled, but a single thought lingered. I was going home in a week, but this time, I wasn't going back as the invisible girl. This time I was coming back as someone who knew her worth. The week before Christmas, I took time off work, carefully wrapped simple but thoughtful gifts, and drove the 6 hours back to my childhood neighborhood in North Seattle. The house hadn't aged well, faded siding, overgrown hedges, and a porch light that flickered like a dying memory. I rang the doorbell with trembling hands. Footsteps approached, and then the door creaked open. "Audrey?" My mother blinked, her eyes wide with surprise. "Wow, it's really you." She gave me a brief, stiff hug. "You look different." Inside, the familiar scent hit me, old wood polish, stale air, and that ever-present bowl of dried potpourri. The living room was packed, and conversations halted as all eyes turned toward me. Well, look who finally showed up, someone muttered. Is she wearing sweats? Another whispered. I glanced down at my tailored black slacks and designer coat. Quiet luxury, but clearly lost on this crowd. Then Dylan emerged from the kitchen, beaming. Everyone, this is Mia, my wife, he announced, gesturing to her belly. And your future niece or nephew. Congratulations, I said, offering a small, polite smile. He smirked. Still coding in a corner somewhere? Laughter rippled through the room. I felt my jaw tighten. I work in tech, I replied calmly. If you've ever returned home with more power than they imagined, hit subscribe. Because the next part of the story is where everything changes. Tech, huh? Dylan smirked as if it were a joke. Like fixing printers or answering help desk calls. He turned to Mia, a conspiratorial grin on his face. Audrey was always the weird one, probably working out of some basement somewhere. I just smiled faintly. Something like that. Mom clapped her hands, her voice falsely cheerful. Dinner will be ready soon. Audrey, put your things down. Dylan's using your old room as his office now, so you'll be sleeping on the couch. Of course he was. Of course I would be. The night was a slow drip of condescension. Aunt Nora cornered me by the sad bowl of punch. Your brother's starting his own business. He's such a visionary, and you're still in computers. I write software, I replied, my patience wearing thin. She scrunched her nose. Well, someone has to do the boring stuff. Uncle Mike leaned over during dinner prep. Dishwasher position still open at my diner pays minimum wage, but it's honest work. Thanks, I said politely. I'm good. At dinner, they seated me at the far end of the table next to the kitchen door, as if I were an afterthought. Dylan predictably held the spotlight. This is going to disrupt everything, he declared dramatically. We just need the startup capital to launch. How much? Dad asked, his eyes gleaming with paternal pride. $200,000 to get rolling, Dylan said casually. I nearly choked on my water. It was every cliché failed startup pitch I'd ever heard. We'll figure something out, Mom said, patting his hand. Family helps family. After dinner, she handed me a thin blanket and gestured toward the couch. Christmas morning arrived with Dylan and Mia storming down the stairs like excited kids' presents piled high around them. They unwrapped mine luxury gifts thoughtfully chosen. Audrey, these are beautiful, Mom gasped, holding up her new designer bag. But when it came to my turn, a sudden awkward silence fell. Oh no, Mom gasped too loudly, her hand flying to her mouth. Dylan burst out laughing. Audrey, we completely forgot, just like when we were kids. Don't cry this time. He smirked, his eyes glinting. You're an adult now. Something shifted inside me, not sadness, not anger, but a profound clarity. I'm not going to cry, I said evenly, reaching into my purse. Actually, I bought myself a pretty great gift this year. I pulled out my keychain and held it up, the brushed steel catching the dim morning light. Mom frowned. What's that? Keys, I said simply, to my new apartment. I closed on it last week. Silence fell like a dropped plate, heavy and resonant. Dad blinked. You bought an apartment. With money, I said, my voice steady from my job. My company just licensed a cybersecurity framework I built to a major international bank. My cut was solid. Mom's eyes narrowed, a glint of something I couldn't quite decipher. How solid? I shrugged, feigning indifference. About $150,000 0 cents after taxes. You could have heard a fork drop. Dylan's mouth hung open and Mia's eyes widened. Mom and Dad stared at me as if I'd just confessed to living a double life. 150,000 0 cents, Mom repeated, her voice pitching up in disbelief. What kind of job pays bonuses like that? I told you, I said calmly. I'm a software developer. I build enterprise security systems for Fortune 500 clients. Dad leaned in, his expression suddenly intrigued. How long have you been earning this kind of money? Since graduation, I replied. The bonuses change, but my salary's been 6 figures for a while now. That's when the switch flipped. Mom stood up, all sunshine and sugar. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We're so proud of you. Dad chimed in, his voice booming. Dylan, did you hear that your sister works with Fortune 500 companies? Dylan's jaw clenched and Mia leaned in, whispering something into his ear. Mom perched beside me on the couch, her arm around my shoulders. So tell us about this apartment. How many bedrooms? 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, Fort Greene, close to work. I rattled off. She beamed. We should visit. Families should stick together. I almost laughed. Family. After 8 years of silence. Actually, I said, standing up, I've got a long drive ahead. Mom reached for my arm. You just got here, stay? Dad nodded vigorously. We haven't even talked about your career. As I packed, I could hear them whispering, voices hushed and urgent. When I came back downstairs, suitcase in hand, they were waiting, those eager, strained smiles already setting off alarm bells. Before you head out, Dad said, stepping forward, we should talk about Dylan's business opportunity. As you mentioned, he needs a little capital to get started. Dylan smiled, a condescending smirk that made my stomach churn. It's a solid investment. You'd be in on the ground floor. How much? I asked flatly, my eyes fixed on his. Just $200,000, he said, as if it were pocket change. With what you make, that's nothing, right? I looked at them, my parents who once laughed when Uncle Mike offered me a dishwashing job, my brother who spent a lifetime mocking me, and his wife who chuckled along just yesterday morning. No, I said, the single word cutting through the tense air. The smiles vanished instantly. What do you mean, no? Mom snapped, her voice sharp. I mean, I'm not giving you any money. But we're family, Dad exclaimed, as if the word itself held any weight. I folded my arms. Where was family when I was told to find my own place the day after graduation? Or when you paid for Dylan's college but left me to figure it out alone? That was different, Mom protested, her face reddening. We didn't have money back then. You had money for Dylan, I said, my voice unwavering. Dylan showed promise, she barked, then immediately backtracked, her eyes darting nervously. I mean, we thought work would be better for you. I grabbed my bag. I need to go. You selfish brat! Dylan exploded, his face contorted in anger. After everything this family did for you.
What did you do? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Raise me. Feed me. That's parenting, not charity, and you made sure I knew I wasn't wanted. I walked to the door as they followed, still protesting. You'll regret this, Mom shouted.
I won't, I said, and for the first time in my life, I truly meant it. By the time I hit the highway, my phone lit up calls, texts, guilt trips. I blocked them all. At a rest stop back in Brooklyn, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the city glow from my balcony, a peaceful, vibrant tapestry of lights. Sarah texted, "Heard what happened. Sorry about them." "Don't be," I replied. This was the best gift they ever gave me, freedom. She sent back a laughing emoji. "Your mom's telling everyone you're ungrateful." "Let her," I wrote back. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to a flood of messages, but not from my parents or Dylan. These were from aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. "Your mother told us what happened. How could you abandon your family? Dylan is trying to build something. You should support him. We always knew you were selfish." One by one, I blocked them, every name, every guilt trip gone, except for Sarah. She called that afternoon. "Jesus, Audrey," she sighed. "The whole family's imploding. Your mom called everyone saying you're rich and won't help Dylan." "Good for her," I said dryly. "She's telling people you've forgotten where you came from." "Of course she is," I scoffed. "God forbid they admit that the daughter they ignored actually did something with her life."
Sarah's voice softened. "I'm proud of you for what it's worth." "It's worth a lot," I told her. "You're the only one I care to keep in touch with." "Are you really okay cutting everyone else off?" "Sarah," I said gently, "I cut them off 8 years ago. This just made it official." That evening, I met my friends at our usual spot in Fort Greene, a cozy wine bar with worn leather booths and fairy lights strung over the bar. I told them everything. "Good riddance," Lisa said, her voice firm. "They sound toxic as hell." "Do you think you'll miss them?" another friend asked. I thought about it, truly considered the question. "No," I finally replied. "I think I've been mourning the family I never had. This just closed the book." I raised my glass. "To chosen family." "To chosen family," they echoed, smiling as we toasted. My phone buzzed an unknown number. I switched it to silent. 6 months later, summer had wrapped the city in sunlight. I sat on my balcony, coffee in hand, watching the morning unfold below. It felt like emerging from a fog I hadn't realized I'd been living in. Sarah still called weekly with updates, not because I asked, but because she genuinely cared. "Jake's daughter was born last month," she told me. "Madison." "That's nice," I said, and I meant it. I hoped that little girl would be loved better than I was. According to Sarah, Dylan and Mia were still living with my parents. The big startups still just talk. Even the relatives were getting tired of hearing about it, apparently. My parents, meanwhile, had turned my betrayal into their favorite sob story at every family gathering. They painted me as the ungrateful daughter who vanished despite all their sacrifices. Meanwhile, my life had taken a turn I wouldn't trade for anything. 3 months after that disastrous Christmas, I met Ethan at a coffee shop near my office. He was a freelance designer with a gentle smile and a deep respect for boundaries. He understood the tech world, and more importantly, he understood what it meant to walk away from a toxic family he had done it too. Work was thriving. I'd been promoted to lead systems architect for a major AI security integration. The pay raise was great, but what thrilled me more was the freedom to build something groundbreaking. My team respected me, my ideas mattered. I was finally building the kind of life I used to dream about from a lumpy couch in my parents' basement. About a month ago, Dylan somehow got hold of a new number and called. "Hey, Audrey," he said, awkwardly chipper. "Thought we could catch up." "What do you want?" I asked, cutting straight to the chase.
"Hurry, Madison should meet her aunt. Things are tight right now. Mom and Dad's house needs work and you don't even know how much." "Doesn't matter," he exploded. I hung up and blocked the number. As I sat there in my own apartment sipping coffee beside Ethan, I felt nothing but peace. Everything they said I'd never have love, stability, success, I had built on my own terms. Sarah later mentioned they were turning my old bedroom into a nursery. It didn't sting. That room never felt like mine. This one does. They still tried reaching me through distant cousins and family friends. My favorite was Aunt Nora's voicemail, "Family is forever, Audrey." But I'd already walked away, and I wasn't turning back. Ethan and I were planning a trip to Japan next month. We'd been learning the language, mapping out temples, and bookmarking noodle shops. Sarah messaged me. "Mom saw your post. She says it's typical you'd rather vacation than help family." "Good," I said. "Maybe she'll finally get it." Last week, I was promoted to head of engineering, a top 1% salary. "You earned this," my boss said, his voice sincere. We celebrated with friends. Lisa joked, "Your mom probably sensed your bank balance went up that night." Ethan brought champagne to the balcony. "Let's buy a house," I said, a new dream sparking to life. "With space, a yard, maybe a dog." My phone buzzed Sarah again. "Mom says you must be a drug dealer." I laughed. Let them spin their stories. I am living mine.
Valuable lessons to heed.
Your worth is not defined by others' expectations. Audrey's story powerfully illustrates that your value isn't tied to the approval or perception of your family, especially if they're dismissive. True worth comes from within and from the life you build for yourself. It's okay to choose your own family. Blood relatives don't always provide the support and love we need. Audrey found genuine connection and affirmation in her chosen friends, demonstrating that strong, healthy relationships can be found outside of biological ties. Set boundaries for your well-being. Walking away from toxic relationships, even familial ones, is an act of self-preservation. Audrey's decision to cut ties despite the backlash ultimately led to her peace and success. Invest in yourself and your passion. Audrey's dedication to coding, even when others mocked it, paid off immensely. Pursuing what genuinely interests and challenges you can lead to unexpected opportunities and personal fulfillment. Success is the best revenge or peace. While Audrey didn't seek revenge, her quiet success and happiness became the ultimate answer to those who underestimated and dismissed her. Her peace wasn't dependent on their acknowledgement. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you walked away from, what peace you built. Your support reminds me that I'm not alone, and maybe you need that reminder too. My advice: don't wait for permission to choose yourself. Build the life that reflects your worth, not their expectations. And if you relate, hit the subscribe button.